Hi everyone, Gary Cassidy here. Welcome back to Inside the Ropes. With me, this is easy because you can see him, so I don't need to do the rhyme and make a fool of myself. All I need to say is he's a WWE Hall of Famer, 6-time Intercontinental Champion, legend inside and outside the ring, which we're going to get round to. But first things first, he's also soon to be a podcast host. We're going to have My World, which, you know, I don't know how the man that you're going to be alongside finds the hours in the day to do it. He's going to pull a load of great stories out of you. I'm going to try and get some of them out of you just before then. It's just to kind of ruin your podcast a little bit by giving a little preview. First place I want to start, though, before we get into Jeff Jarrett, there was a little bit of sad news that broke yesterday where Steve McMichael, a guy you've worked with a lot in WCW, he's been diagnosed with ALS. Just wanted to know what your memories are of working with Steve McMichael, because for me, you know, I was a massive WCW fan as a kid, so I remember it really fondly.
You know, it goes without saying. Thank you first off, Gary, having me on. Looking forward to chatting. As I always tell you, please speak English during the interview. My Scottish is not as good as my English. So, all kidding aside, no. When I heard the news on Mongo, and when I saw the video, it broke my heart. You know, what a man. He's a man's man. What an athlete. You know, I had some of his first matches in WCW, and I would often tell folks, and, you know, doing interviews like this, and people would say, who's the strongest guy, or just different stories of different talents I've been in the ring with. And, you know, Scott Steiner's a guy who he's quick, but he's deceptively, his speed, I don't think, everybody sees his muscles, but his speed was deceptively unreal. But I have said this about Mongo many, many times. He may be, and I'm sure it's from his football background and the ability to work inside the shoulders and just his skill set. But he's certainly one of the strongest guys that I've ever been in the ring with. He'd rip your head off. But the thing that truly amazed me about Mongo and getting to know him, especially in those early days, is that here's a Super Bowl winner, a legendary football player, comes from one of the greatest defensive, if not the greatest defenses of all time in the NFL. And he stepped into our industry with a passion for it, good old Texas boy. And man, you talk about coachable and teachable and wanting to learn. And obviously he had been in locker rooms his whole life, but incredible respect. Same with Kevin Green, same with Reggie White. Those football players that, obviously all three of those guys at the very top of their game and then stepped over into our world. But Mongo made a living out of it. And, you know, it was really, really incredible to get to know him and work with him. And then I saw him later at TNA. He was the head football coach of the Chicago Arena team. But, you know, seeing the video, it's just gut-wrenching. But, you know, I said a prayer for him as soon as I saw it. But it's tough. That's tough news to swallow. But, you know, ALS, when you read about that, it was a really, really tough pill to swallow, candidly.
Yeah. And I promise I'm not going to speak all about WCW as much as I would like to. We'll move on to other things. But I want to ask, there's one thing that for me, I was, you know, watching when I was younger. I was about that right age where you hear certain promos and you go, ooh, that's a bit close to the needle. I want to ask you, we mentioned infamous rhyme. However, I remembered Vince McMahon during the Raw Nitro simulcast hit out with a line about GOONNE, you'll be gone. What was your thoughts when you heard that line? I assume you didn't know about it before it was going to come out.
You know, with Bruce's podcast, Something to Wrestle With, and Conrad as the co-host of Bruce's podcast and now mine, we're going to get into that because what's really unique, Bruce was actually in Panama City, but obviously working for Vince. And so there's a really cool backstory to that. And as you dig deeper into it, We're going to cover that in one of the first few episodes of My World. So that's something it's that's been talked about. The match with China, I could go down the list of stories, the Double J vignettes, and the being part of the Four Horsemen. We just mentioned Mongo McMichael. There's so many different stories, and peeling the story back and the different layers of onion. It's funny how we're still talking about it today. That happened in 2001, and here we are 20 years later, 20 years and just over, the people are still sort of hanging on that. And I've always often said that it's and again, I was a wrestling fan, so I'm not pointing fingers at wrestling fans because I'm a wrestling fan, but some people say, oh, that's real. Oh, that's not real. So what is real and what's not real? Well, we're going to tell those kind of stories. But the truth of the matter is Vince does a lot of smart things over the years. Incredibly gifted promoter, probably the greatest promoter of all forms of entertainment of all time. But he's also a showman. And so I immediately thought when I heard it, and we're going to get into this, but they could have picked 30, 40 different guys. I'm the one that got featured. And the real deal details of the contract, you got to be hired before you can get fired. And we're going to get into all those kind of stories, but it was pretty cool. And I'll say this, and hats off to Bruce and Vince. They shot a vignette that was just sort of maybe off the cuff, and we're still talking about it 20 years later. So I think that's a real unique side of all of it, but we're going to get into that on My World for sure.
I can't wait to hear that. That's what I'm going to be tuned into, because that, and you mentioned about things, feeling real. The promo that you cut that had Vince with the Scream mask, the big Austin pop, all of that stuff was good stuff. But, we mentioned the Intercontinental Championship, and I think one of the most, anytime you mention Jeff Jarrett, I instantly think of the Intercontinental Championship. But again, one of the most emotional kind of moments was you got inserted into a match for the title, which you won just a few days after Owen Hart had passed away. And obviously you had been working with Owen Hart just before it. I always remember that moment where you get handed the title and just yelled out his name, and it's an incredible moment. I want to ask what your memories are of that time. Is it just, a blur in between what happened, or do you remember it, vividly? And did you think through the moment of shouting his name? Was it something spontaneous or not?
That was something that, Conrad, very respectful co-host, I would have never sort of signed up just to hit around that. And it goes without saying, when I've been asked about Owen for the last 20 years, what kind of ribs or this story or that story. Well, one of the episodes is going to be about Owen. But because he, to this day, they don't make folks like Owen anymore. Authentic, real, sincere, a family man, incredible integrity. But there are some parts of during that time that from the time of the accident and then, like you just said, going through that and facing the Godfather and the timing and just there were, and not just me, the entire company on some levels was still reeling from that. So that exact moment, so to speak, was a fueled, highly emotional situation, of course. Yeah, that's again something that we're going to dive into. But it was winning the Intercontinental title, like you said, it's a prestigious belt and always has been. Each championship I won, that obviously, I guess I'm saying the obvious is what I'm getting around to. That was a special moment for me personally because of the Owen factor, so to speak.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite moments. Whenever I think of, Jeff Jarrett, that's one of the things that I just go, man, it's one of the most iconic things. There's another one in terms of titles that gets a slightly different viewpoint. Or there's two, but I'm going to ask you about one of them. Bash at the Beach 2000, Hulk Hogan. For me, it's it's the kind of thing where, again, people don't know what's real, what's not real, and it makes you question what's real. What are your memories of that day, of that happening? Did you know it was going to go down as badly as it did, or was it like, we'll just see how it goes?
That is a My World podcast that there was so much that went on, obviously, behind the scenes, not just the day of, the weeks and months leading up to that. Lots of, it goes without saying, and I've said this, and candidly, for many years after that, there was litigation, there were lawsuits going on, there was a lot of he said, she said. I never spoke on it, ever. I never had very, very little to say about it. Conrad, he almost said, we're talking about that. So we will. That's coming up. But, you layer in the factors of Brad Siegel and Hulk Hogan and Vince Russo and Booker T. There was a lot of good that came out of that night, as bad as there was a lot of dysfunction. To me, it was a perfect example of the microcosm that WCW was, that it was a corporate. It was such a corporate entity that, the buck didn't stop with any one person. It stopped with Hogan on creative control. Well, Vince was the head writer. And then you had Eric's role in it, and Brad Siegel, and you had the executives. And then obviously me as a talent. And then the timing of Booker stepping up to the plate. It's a really fascinating story. I can remember when the music hit for me to come out. If you go back and watch the original, I think my song played through at least once, maybe twice, because I wanted to wrap my head around what I knew. Being a third generation, my grandmother got into this business in 1946. So knowing what was about to transpire, the uniqueness of the story, and John Laurinaitis, who's head of talent relations, him in the room with me, and me and Hogan talking about the full-on match, and we had a 20-25 minute match being discussed. There's a lot of ins and outs of that story that, candidly, I've never told. So I'm excited to sort of dive into that. Everybody remembers what a black mark that day was, and I could not agree more. It was not good for the industry, but the story behind the story is pretty compelling.
I can't wait to hear that one. Before I lift things back up, because we're not going to always talk about, low points, but I need to ask about one that, again, I think a little bit controversial. So fast forward a little bit. TNA, you create this, this thing that's still around today. It's still, one of the kind of major promotions. But one of my memories quite early on was when Macho Man Randy Savage turned up to confront yourself. And we'll say his appearance was fleeting. It was, he wasn't around for very long. Confronted you, and then the rumour was that there was a little bit of disagreement about a certain title change, and then he just left. What was it like working with Macho Man? Was it quite a difficult thing bringing him in and then having to creatively discuss these things and having him leave? Or, was it just like, it happens?
Look, Randy and my father, Randy and his brother Lanny and his father Angelo, they ran a promotion. We back in those days, it was called Opposition. So, and then he came to work for my father. And very successful program and huge box office, him and Lawler, and then they had the Loser League Town, and Randy went to the WWF from my family's home promotion. So the Jarretts and the Poffos and the Savages, so to speak, we go back to the 70s. So at that time, we had just gotten to Orlando, or hadn't been there long. There was him and my father had multiple discussions. We were really not sure on either side what direction it was going to take place. It's a fascinating story again of what went down, because what was reported and what actually really transpired and what the real forward moving plans. You got to remember where Randy was at that time in his life, rap music and Superman movies, and his in career was way in his rearview mirror. So the wrestling fan, there was a lot of chatter around things that were never discussed. But when we get to my world and dive into it, I think even Conrad may be surprised on a few of these. That one in particular as well.
Most definitely. And going to bring it back up a bit because, you know, obviously there's been a lot of highs as well. One for me would be, and again, I feel like there was so much you could delve into with this that didn't, you know, quite get the time it needed. You worked with Undertaker quite a lot, but not enough for me. You know, you had quite a few little rivalries with the Undertaker, and it was like, man, I think we should have seen more of that. But what was it like for you working with Undertaker, you know, the way he was backstage? Because we always hear about how he's this locker room leader. You're obviously someone that's very creatively minded as well. So did you guys ever butt heads, or was it always like, oh no, we're on the same page?
I mean, it goes without saying. Mark, we go back to the late 80s at WCCW in the Von Erich, and then he came and wrestled as Master of Pain in the USWA airs. But, you know, he arrived at the WWF 2 years before me, maybe a little bit longer than that. But I've got a lot of fond memories. His character development and persona. And there's a cool story that in I want to say Memorial Day of 95. Memorial Day of 95. I can remember this back in when we had answer machines, not cell phones, but answer machines. That Memorial Day Raw popped a number. I wrestled the Undertaker, but what made that match so fun, and it was a TV match, but you know, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 minutes, but a lot of action, and I mean, it was going. But what made it so fun and compelling, and just a lot of moving parts, was the roadie was in my corner, and obviously Paul Bear in his, and they interacted, and I can remember sort of the magic moments. And you know, when we came back through the dressing room, me and Mark both said, well, that was a lot of fun. So he you know, when you talk specifically about Undertaker, you know, who has had as long a run as him, basically uninterrupted? Nobody. I mean, he came on the scene in 90. 91, I guess, was first year, and through this year at the very top. So I believe he has an unparalleled career. Yes, he gets a lot of credit. I still don't think he gets the credit he deserves for what he's done for the industry, the amount of tickets he's sold or pay-per-view buy rates he's sold, how many other pieces of talent that he has truly quote unquote, give the rub, whatever you want to call it. Mark may be the best in-ring businessman that the business has ever had. And I sincerely mean that. He you know, his business acumen, as far as not only taking care of his character, but others as well, I don't think he has a peer, candidly.
No, I definitely agree with that. I just wish we'd seen more of that because it seemed like you guys just went well together. But I've got one last question before I have a couple of little quick fire ones at the end. The last major question I need to ask. The last time we seen Jeff Jarrett in a WWE ring, we actually seen you wrestle a match. We seen you in WWE after that for a little talking head thing, but we saw you at the Royal Rumble with Elias, the moment with the guitars, and then we saw you in a match with Elias, which was mind-blowing to see only 2 years ago. What was it like working with Elias? Were you just like, that's a no-brainer, I want to work with this guy? And, you know, or was it like the kind of thing where you're like, I feel like I have to because of the guitars? What was it like just working with him?
You know, it was only the one time, and I was up for taking it around for live events or whatever it may be. The persona that you know, the Double J from the 90s and Elias from 2019, 2020, it was a lot of fun. And what was really cool was the people in the arena. They were, it was a great vibe, great reactions. I mean, people were like, I want to see this. I want to hear it. When you can tell when there's a rumble of people that that just going to the ring that night. People were interested in seeing that. You just mentioned it from Royal Rumble, and then me and Brian sang the song and did the guitar shot and everything that went with it. I've got a lot of respect, but I think Elias is a talent that the sky could be the limit. He's going to have to take the bull by the horns and go with it, but he's got loads of talent.
Excellent. And one final very quick question. Samoa Joe's just become a free agent. There's a lot of talk about where he might go. You're a person that's worked with him, a lot. You know him very well from a few places. What are your thoughts on Samoa Joe as a person, as a character, as a wrestler?
It goes without saying. I've sort of got a track record, I'd say. When we brought Joe in, I don't think he lost a match for a year and a half. So that tells you what I think of him as a talent. Joe is a very unique talent in and of itself. He can, we called it the X division back then, but definitely high flying, moving. But Joe has obviously promo skills, color commentator on Raw, in-ring skills. He can be a protagonist or an antagonist, or you can call it a heel or a babyface, whatever you prefer to call it. Joe is an incredible talent. And I'm excited for the world to see Joe's next move because his there is an enormous amount of gas left in that tank, and I'm very excited to see where he takes it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think you've given us the perfect advert for my world because everyone's going to need to tune in and see what goes on there. Can't wait to listen myself. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Now, I appreciate it. My world, May 4th, every Tuesday thereafter.
Cannot wait. Thank you so much. And I'll just...
Thank you.